Hello, everybody. Welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9 and on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube station at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm delighted to welcome back to the show and always welcome return guest. Jason Iannuzzi is here. He is the artistic director of Cantemus Chamber Chorus. In addition to a successful career in music and drama education, Jason has an extensive and varied background in choral conducting, vocal coaching, and music direction. Cantemus is following up their spectacular, sold-out performance of Annalise from this past January with a concert on the theme of different varieties of love, which will be taking place on May 11th at 7:30 p.m. in Beverly at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, and here in Newburyport, appropriately enough, on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 12th at 4 p.m. at St. Paul's Episcopal Church on High Street. So first off, Jason, welcome and thank you for taking time to come on the show to preview this concert.
Thank you so much, Mary. Always a pleasure to come in and have a talk with you.
Well, back at you. I wanted to start, the theme for this concert is love is love is love. Please tell us about the origin story of your decision to focus this Cantemus concert on different forms of love.
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, our first semester concert was James Whitbourne's Annalise, which is a sort of vocal cantata on the words of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
And although it's a work that really emphasizes hope and the sort of hope that Anne Frank had in her particular circumstances, the backdrop of the piece is the Nazis in World War II, essentially trying to annihilate the Jews, Black people, LGBTQ, and anyone that the regime considered undesirable. And so it really brings to mind and makes us think about truly the worst in humanity, the worst in any of us. And so we really felt it was important to contrast that with a concert that had a lighter sort of musical content and also looked at the other side of the coin, the best in humanity, which I believe love in all its forms is the very best. The best of humanity. So that was why we decided to move with this concert. And the concert essentially looks at four of the major sort of aspects of love. You think about the bonds of friendship, the romantic love between two people of any gender, the sort of indescribable love between a parent and child, and then finally the sort of all-encompassing love of people kind.
Yeah. Many different varieties of love, and I can hear your intention I love the idea of focusing on what's best in humanity, to uplift our spirits. And I think we're all in need of that these days, Jason. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just as there are many varieties of love, as you've just been talking about, there are many varieties of songs about love. So I hope that next you could tell us something about the range of songs and styles of music and composers that you've decided to include in this program.
Sure. It's a really varied program. I'm really happy with it. It's not a nothing but love songs, sort of Valentine's program. That would be one thing and would also be a wonderful program. But this, in the way that we're exploring all these different aspects of love, gives us a chance to program all sorts of different music. So we have, rousing, collegiate buddy song like Viva la Compagnie, followed by an arrangement that I did for the choir of The Parting Glass, the wonderful Celtic folk song, which will feature a soprano soloist from the group and also a flute soloist. And then we have, sort of traditionally cast romantic love in a piece by contemporary American composer Nathan Jones. It's a setting of a text by Sarah Teasdale. It's called Be For Me the Earth. It's a very simple 4-line poem, but he just crafts it into this just absolutely breathtaking piece, which is certainly one of our favorites to sing. And that is followed by a piece from Leonard Bernstein's Songfest, which is To What You Said. It's a setting of a poem by Walt Whitman that has, critics have said different things about it over the years, but It certainly could be interpreted as having homosexual undertones.
Hmm.
I think when Bernstein set the poem, he certainly was thinking about that. And now, of course, with the advent of the movie Maestro, we're all thinking
Yes.
about this sort of dual life that Bernstein was living. It's a gorgeous piece. It's scored for orchestra, bass baritone solo, and cello, and a humming chorus a la Madame Butterfly in the background. So we have
Ah.
piano. We have one of our bass singers is featured in the piece, and we also have a wonderful cellist from our Cantemus choir who's
Oh.
featured in the piece, and that should be very special indeed. And then we have, trying to keep things light, we've included a set of pieces by the famous P.D.Q. Bach. And
I-
these are called the Liebeslieder polkas, which of course is an affront to the Liebeslieder waltzes of Johannes Brahms. And PDQ one-upped old Johannes by scoring it not for piano four hands, but piano five hands. So he just takes it to that next level. And they're really hilarious. Takes on Elizabethan poetry. Sometimes the poetry presented in its exact form, but the music will play against the poetry in a very comical way. Or sometimes PDQ took a little bit of liberty with the words of Shakespeare, for instance, and it ends up being having pretty riotous results. So.
Uh-huh. What an amazingly varied program. I'm excited just hearing you talk about it. I was hoping because I've heard reference to PDQ Bach, and people always seem to smile when they hear the name PDQ Bach. Could you tell us a little bit more about who is PDQ Bach and what's up with the PDQ?
Sure. Well, P.D.Q. Bach is a pseudonym for the American composer Peter Schickele.
Ah,
Peter Schickele actually just passed away this past January, so
oh,
our programming of his music is pretty timely, and we
yeah.
programmed these pieces before he had passed. So it's sort of interesting that worked out that way. He was a Swarthmore and Juilliard educated musician, a very erudite musician. But when he was after graduate school, he began to sort of play around with this character who he called PDQ as in pretty damn quick Bach. And of course, that's a spoof on all of Bach's children. He calls PDQ the oddest of the 20 odd children of J.S. Bach. So. And many of Bach's children were known by their three initials, CPE Bach, for instance. So
Okay.
PDQ is a play there, and he was the foremost American musical satirist, actually, maybe even internationally, because he was able to create musical comedy, but to do so in a way that you had to understand music and had to know the
Hmm.
classical repertoire in order to be in on the joke, as it were. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of little musical jokes, and there are some interesting props that we use during the performance itself. So that's a little outside of Cantemus's normal wheelhouse, but they're having a great time with it. And the singer said, "Man, after singing Annalise, it's so nice to throw ourselves into this
Some, yeah,
piece, which could not be more different."
some
Yeah.
comic relief. I'm not going to ask you what the props are. I'm going to wait and be surprised.
Yes, absolutely. Just know that they'll be there.
Well, I also read that there's a Lakota lullaby that you'll be singing. And please tell us about the origin story of this lullaby and a little about what it's like.
Sure, that's a wonderful piece. It was recommended to me by a colleague. I said I was looking for a particular kind of piece in the program, and she came up with this, and I listened and thought this would be wonderful for the group. The program in the piece is partly connected to, as I mentioned before, our board's commitment to expanding our repertoire,
Yeah.
expanding our audience base, and essentially using our voices to give voice to groups of people who have traditionally been marginalized. And certainly, the Native American population fits the bill here. The piece is arranged by a person of Lakota heritage, William Linthicum-Blackhorse.
Hmm.
And he's sort of made it his life's work to bring forward songs which have been hitherto lost, to bring forth translations and pieces which can be performed sort of alongside Western canon
Hmm.
pieces, so that more audiences would hear this piece. And the piece is a traditional lullaby that young mothers would normally sing to their
Hmm.
boys, but it has over the years been sung to female children as well.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting because many of the songs that the Lakota sing, people hear these pieces and think, oh, well, those are just nonsense syllables that don't actually have any meaning. And that's because, a lot of the meaning over the years has been lost because
Oh,
part of the persecution of Native American
yeah.
peoples, which is often happens with folks uh, who are in a situation where they're being occupied is the total destruction of the language
Yeah.
and taking away the ability to sort of hold on to the past. So he did a lot of research in bringing this piece forward, and it's pretty stunning. There's a bit of synchrony with the piece as he was working on it. He decided he was going to set this lullaby, and the terrible mass shooting at Robb Elementary School
Yeah.
suddenly made its way to the airwaves. And so he started thought, well, how can I stay true to my feelings about this piece, but also make a statement about what's just happened in the world? And the piece repeats the basic tune over and over again, but it sort of builds in intensity almost to a stage of anger.
Mm,
And then it sort of gets softer and softer to the end until by the end, the singers are instructed to leave the sound at will, one at a time, and
mm,
begin whispering. And then the whispers also disappear until there's literally just silence. And of course, that's
mm.
that's meant to represent the 19 children and two
Yeah.
adults whose lives were cut short in silence. And it's a very uncomfortable silence at the end of the piece, but I think very powerful. And I'm really glad we're doing the piece.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like a fascinating story and like a very, very powerful musical experience for the
Yeah.
audience to have. So, well, somewhat related to what you're saying, Jason, and of course, we live in very turbulent times. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. There's seems to be so much grievance, hatred, violence, distrust and disillusionment, corruption, and also, of course, rising authoritarian movements all around the world. And these times, I often find the words from Yeats' famous and brilliant poem, The Second Coming," coming to mind, where he wrote this poem in 1919, shortly after the end of the horrible World War I had recently ended. And some of the most memorable lines are, "The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world." And perhaps my favorite lines, "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity."
Mm.
Yet, art and music are always there, eternally thrumming beneath the surface of whatever current events are churning. So I knew that you would have interesting thoughts and wise comments on this topic, but I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about what role, Jason, do you think the arts in general and music in particular can or should play during times like the ones we're living through?
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing those lines of poetry. I think they're very powerful. And unfortunately, they could have been written yesterday. They
That's
were written in
yeah, yes,
1919, but they're
yeah.
telling a story that we unfortunately are still living through today. I think the arts can be a balm, can certainly have a healing quality. I think of the famous quote about, a symphony conductor saying, "I see myself in the way that a ER doctor might see themselves." Whereas in an
Mm,
ER, anyone could walk in at any time who needs my expertise and
yeah.
my help to heal. And in the same way, anyone can walk into our concert venue who's spiritually and mentally in need of healing, and our music making can literally transport someone to a different feeling, a different place.
Mm,
That's amazing. I think music can be certainly a unifier and a community builder. And as you mentioned before, we certainly need that now in this very fragmented time. But I'd also warn against the community of artists just kind of being like ostriches with their heads in the sand,
mm,
and underneath the sand is the beautiful music they're making, and they're all just loving it and enjoying it. And that's not enough. It's not enough for
mhm,
us to make the music and to enjoy it in our little
mhm.
community. I think that art and music should challenge and should make people think. And I think it was Elizabeth Green who said, art itself cannot change the world, but art can move people to change. And
Mm,
therein, the
mhm.
change can happen. And so, my hope is people listen to the music and enjoy the ups and downs and all of the amusing moments and the touching moments and the um, you know, emotionally challenging moments too in the concert, that they will be moved, not just in the
Hmm.
sense of being having a feeling inside, but
Yeah.
literally being moved to action, to think, how does hearing this music and experiencing this concert impact what I do when I walk out of here? Because this sounds really kind of hippy skippy, but I think, love is a way that you live your life.
Hmm.
It's the grace that you give to the person that cuts you off. It's
Yeah.
the patience you give or have when things aren't going your way. It's easy to love someone who's very lovable, but difficult to love, as it were, your enemy. So
Yeah.
I think it challenges us, and I hope without being too like right on the nose
Mhm.
and preachy, I hope that people will hear the music and think there's something there that I can take away in my life practice, if you will.
Mhm. Well, I knew you would have great things to say. I just knew it. And thank you for that. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, and a lot of very powerful ideas there. I love the analogy of the emergency room physician who never knows. You never know what spiritual condition people are going to be in when they come to a concert.
Sure.
And the music, and certainly in the concert you've just described, there's a whole range of moods and messages as well as beauty. And the word that came to my mind as I heard you talking about the power of art and music was transformative.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful thing, what a magical thing, for music to be able to transform a human being's consciousness, because that's what you're really talking about. And what a magnificent and constructive power to let loose upon the world. So thank you for that. Those are very profound ideas, and I appreciate them, Jason, very much. Um, I was going to ask you what impact you hope Love is Love would have on the audiences, but I think you've responded to that question already. Unless there's something else that you wanted to add about what knowing the content of this particular concert as you do, is there anything else that you're hopeful will be transformative in the experience that people have leaving the concert?
I mean, I think we've sort of covered it. I just do caution against, sitting in a room, hearing beautiful music wash over you, and then walking away and thinking, "Oh, that was nice," and just going about your business. I think, my day job is as a high school choral director,
Yeah.
and I talk to my students a lot about, we can have a wonderful experience in a rehearsal and just have that transformative moment, that aha moment where we're sort of in flow and everything's just pouring out of us, and we're feeling that sense of connection. That's great, but that's a sort of selfish view of the arts. The arts are really about giving that feeling and hoping to give that feeling to someone outside of the group, to an audience. So I think we've had a wonderful time in these past weeks rehearsing this music, exploring, as you said, all the different colors, all the different layers of meaning, all the different styles. But to be able to share that with an audience who can then take something away for it is a wonderful joy, and I think what it's all about. So
Yeah. Well, along those lines, what you're saying makes me think about the impact your performance of Annalise had on me. And I know many other people, it was a sold out performance, and I know a lot of the other people who were there, and we've talked about it afterwards. And I find my mind returning to certain of the musical passages, particularly Lynn Eustace's just soaring, stunningly beautiful final piece.
yes,
Um, and when you think about a musical passage, it doesn't just bring the notes, it brings the emotion with it. And so it's like little nuggets of transformation. It's like taking a vitamin.
yeah, sure. A musical vitamin, I love
Like a
it.
musical vitamin, that returns and restores. Because for me, with arts of all kinds, including music and literature, when you feel like you behold something that in an artistic form contains a truth about the human situation, there is a beauty about that, even when it's a harsh truth.
Sure,
There's because it makes us grow wise in certain ways, and kind of facilitates a growth of our minds and of the human spirit. So I continue to be grateful for the performance of Annalise that you all did. And there's my metaphor of the musical vitamins. I think.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well,
Well,
Lynn's a marvelous artist. She knows that piece so well, and it's
yeah,
interesting you mentioned that final movement, which I can barely get through that movement. It's
yeah,
just it's really moving. But we were working on it in rehearsal, and she stopped and said, can we? She said it's too down. Can we like move the tempo for there? There has to. Yes, it's minor. Yes, it's the end. We all know what happens because there has to be some glimmer of hope here. And I thought that was that was a really astute comment, and it
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, working with her was absolutely phenomenal. So,
Well, I think that the glimmer of hope that music also creates is that it's beautiful. It's there's a beauty that is powerful and hopeful kind of inherently, the way I experience it anyway. And you'll note that although it's a profoundly moving piece throughout and hard themes, that after Lynn finished, there's a pause and then everyone leapt to their feet because there's something so powerful and something celebratory
yeah.
about something that kind of encapsulates and transforms in the way that beautiful music, powerful music really does. So that's been just a wonderful, I can't wait for the concert. I'm glad I have my tickets. But I had
Good.
another question for you if you're game for it and if it's fair to ask. I was just curious since we've been talking about the concert's theme is love, and love. Jason, do you have a personally favorite love song or two?
It's so interesting, I always shy away from answering superlative questions. What's your favorite this? What's your best
Yeah.
this? They're very difficult, but in terms of my favorite love song, I can say without hesitation, it's Jerome Kern's "All the Things You Are."
Oh,
I
that's a
just
great
think
song.
it's has such passion and longing in it, and the way that it's written, the chord progression sort of goes far afield, but he makes every chord change seem inevitable, and
Mm.
I just love the tune, always have.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I'm glad you reminded me of that. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's wonderful. I'm a great fan of the Beatles in my life, which people might not necessarily think of as a love song, but it's kind of the type of love that's retrospective,
It's lovely.
looking back on all the things that meant something to you. So to me, it's very kind of sad, uh, but in a good sense, sad in an affirming way, because there's loss involved. I guess often there's loss involved in some of the deepest kinds of love. But anyway,
Or
well, thank you for that, Jason, and thank you for your evocation of the power of music and you're generating excitement in your preview of the concert. It sounds wonderful. So, and we'd be remiss if we didn't end by telling people how they can get tickets and more information.
Sure. Well, the concerts take place on Mother's Day weekend, not by accident. Saturday, May 11th at 7:30, St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Beverly. Lovely space. We were just there rehearsing yesterday. And Sunday, May 12th, in Newburyport at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, 4 p.m. Tickets are available via our website, cantemus.org. And we really hope to see everyone there. It's a great event to bring your mom to. You can do dinner and a concert.
There you go. A perfect Mother's Day. Jason, thank you so much. It's always fun to talk to you. That's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. And until then, be well and think about your favorite love song and hum a few bars, and you may find it transformative. Take care, everybody. Farewell, Jason.
Thank you.